Hello, my name is Sylvie Albert. I'm a professor of strategy, leadership, and entrepreneurship at the University of Winnipeg in Canada. I'm joined here today with my colleague, Al McLeod. He's a consultant on innovation, and together we are going to talk about developing a system of innovation. This will be done over several videos, giving an opportunity for budding or existing innovators to think about their systems using a variety of tools that Al and I will be presenting over the several videos that will follow. So welcome, Al. Al is a longtime senior administrator in some pretty impressive organizations like CanWest Global, IBM, Wawanesa Insurance, where we met. And he is now doing quite a bit of consulting on innovation and is a serial entrepreneur himself. So look forward to this discussion, Al.
Thank you. Me too.
So in this first video, we will talk about a definition of innovation. And let's look at some of the first concepts. So the European government does a survey, for example, and they've described innovation along the lines of the number of products and systems innovation and marketing and strategic innovation, all those kinds of descriptions that they incorporate into a survey every few years, look at how their organizations are doing in order to make some decisions around what policy changes might be needed and how they encourage innovation to continue to grow. So that's one example of how you might define innovation. Another one is along the lines of what academics tend to look at. So you see a model on the screen from Cooper, talks about innovation as being the type that are transformational or incremental. So these are other types of definitions for innovation in terms of the impact and how much change is actually occurring in organizations. So I'll maybe describe how you see innovation.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about a couple different models because there are a few. This is one I like that comes from design thinking, and that's an innovation occurring at the intersection between desirability, feasibility, and viability. Mm-hmm. So desirability is all about, do customers want it, or even more importantly, need it? Is it feasible? Can we build it? And viability is, can we build a successful business model to support the innovation?
Right. So this is great because it gets us started in terms of very broad. So another model is the one that Osterwalder developed around the three types of innovations. You want to explain what that looks like?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the work of Strategizer and Osterwalder and his group. So the three types of innovation they talk about, and you'll notice an overlap between many of the definitions, but I like theirs because they always operate at the business model level. And so now they talk about transformative, which is all about building new business models and value propositions and really new growth engines. And for this kind of transformative innovation, I think of Amazon Web Services, right? Amazon was not in the infrastructure business. Suddenly they were, and it's grown to a huge business for them. Sustaining innovation is about replacing and extending value propositions, new channels and new geographies, and it's about taking businesses that you have and making sure they stay successful over time. And efficiency is about improving things. It's about making things better for customers, for employees, making your existing business models run better, and refining value propositions. All three are important.
Right. And similarly, again, as you said, many of these definitions support one another's concept and maybe add another small element. This one here was research by O'Reilly, where it's a little bit of an older piece of research, but I think still very relevant to the idea of how we might view innovation and where we might put some focus. And in this one, they talk about the ambidextrous organization is one that has to do more than one type of innovation, and it has to think in terms of what innovation it might do for new customers or existing customers, what it might do maybe more in the short terms in terms of incremental innovations for each of these types of customer groups, what it might do in terms of what they called architectural innovations, and these are things like technology changes and process changes, which all of our organizations today, with all the amount of environmental shifts that are happening, need to continually do, technology being a really big one these days. And the third type was more that discontinuous, and we'll talk about what's the next curve, and that'll be coming up in shortly. So yet another definition, right?
Yeah, if I could add one thing on the last topic, is just the concept of ambidextrous is also about being able to run your current business and innovate, which
Right.
is really hard.
Yes.
And so that's another thing in that HBR article that I want to point out.
Yes.
So this innovate, I like this one. Because I often hear people saying we want to hire creative people so we can be innovative. And the difference between creativity and innovation when it comes to the innovation world is something I want to point out. So creativity is about thinking of something new, and there's lots of creative people in the world.
Yeah.
But innovation is about implementing something new that provides value. And quite often when you go into companies, they'll say, we have no shortage of ideas. The problem is none of them get implemented. And an idea that doesn't get implemented is just a dream.
You're completely right, and we see it in our students as well. When they're working on case studies and they have all these wonderful ideas on how they fix particular organizations when they read some of the problems, but you have to be able to understand that there's risk associated, and how is the market going to react, and
Right.
there's a lot of critical thinking into making these ideas workable, sustainable, and that generates some revenue or some goodwill or something, right?
Right.
And so, yes, I mean, organizations really do need to think in terms of how they equip people to not make a case for some of those creative ideas so that they become real innovations.
Right.
Right? So here's our curve, and maybe go through that curve with us, for us.
Yeah, so the S curve is one that you'll see very often in any discussions about innovation. And what it talks about is that all businesses, products, humans, we all go through this kind of curve. But if we focus on businesses, they start as startups, they go through a period of growth, which can be many, many years. They hit maturity, the peak, where they have their highest profits and engagement. And then eventually, competition, time catches up to them, and they run into decline, and they start cost cutting and building efficiencies versus focusing on building the business. And eventually, if nothing else changes, they end up ceasing to be a business, or being acquired, or whatever happens. And the point of innovation is, don't wait until you're in that decline mode to start doing something about their business. I've been part of some businesses where I saw us going through this kind of painful process. And the one thing that most people don't talk about when you're going through that decline is when you also start to lose your best people.
Right.
So not only are you're less profitable, you're losing your best people. So it becomes very difficult to innovate. But if you look back at your growth period and your maturity period, that's when you want to restart the curve, which means start new businesses, start new products at that point that
Right.
will be profitable.
So even though you're very busy growing, you have to pay attention to what the next best product or service, so that you keep being relevant, sustainable.
That's right. And one thing I like to look at is, if you look at startups, modern startups that become successful, and the CEO sticks around, and they continue to innovate. Those are the businesses that you can see that have a business model that works, and they continue to acquire, add new products, experiment. Those are the companies that are the ones to watch, to me, because they figured out how to do that.
Exactly. They're not looking at a piece of technology, ignoring it, and having their competitor take the market to an entirely new direction.
Right.
Right, as we've seen many companies do, unfortunately.
Yes.
Companies live less long these days, so they really need
That's
to
right.
think about innovation.
Yep.
So we talk about lots of changes. People refer to it as VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment that we live in. And some of these issues are reasons to innovate. And also some of them are more short-term, and so sometimes all of our attention is on the short term, and we have to be careful of that. But even amongst the short term, some of these things have long-term implications, and therefore, a rethink sometimes is needed, and more innovation on how we deal with that. These are some of the examples of trends, the aging workforce. We've known that for a long time, but we are losing some of our best minds, people that really know how to run the business. And so, how do we prepare the next generation of leaders and innovators with the knowledge that they need from the past, but also encourage them not to be stifled by an older management that is perhaps a little bit too comfortable sometimes in the existing business model. So that's one trend, the rise of the millennium generation that has different ideals in terms of values and what they expect and so forth, and all the changes that comes from that. All the changes that we have culturally, because with the aging population, we really need to, especially in Canada, attract immigrants that will help us meet all of those workforce needs that we have. So virtual marketplace, we've seen like a tremendous disruption happening through the pandemic, and automation of businesses and the rise of the data economy. And these are just things that are affecting us right now, right? And that major reasons to innovate.
Yeah, and innovate for sure. Just you need to consider all these things in your planning, and you can't plan for everything.
No.
So you need to be agile. So some of these things you could say, well, that's bad. Maybe if you get ahead of it, it's something you can see as an opportunity, as we've better than I, with the strategy work you do. But these can be opportunities, and if you let them sit and you do nothing about them, they can become real threats to your organization. So you have to think about, just the rate of change is incredible. How do you manage taking that change in and processing it, and then keeping your business going very successfully?
Exactly. So in our next video, we're going to talk a little bit about how you plan for that longer term change. And when we talk about volatility, I mean, even in terms of the rise of the BRIC countries and their impact on, half of all new consumptions is coming from, Brazil, China, India, and 2/3 of the GDP growth. So a tremendous influence and opportunities, as you say, to work with some of those emerging countries. And also, we're living through a lot of protectionism.
Right.
And, some concerns over, we've had a lot of supply chain issues during the pandemic, and, lots of governments that are wanting to repatriate businesses. But at the same time, the biggest growth right now in revenues is occurring in the data flow.
Right.
And those are not necessarily protected. They're still flowing quite a bit globally. And all of this data analytics and AI, and I know you're very involved with everything that's happening in terms of advanced technologies. Lots of growth in revenues for companies that are looking at using some of those tools, right?
Yes, absolutely. And if you're not staying current, though, and if you're not watching what all the startups are doing around you, that's one key thing, is to actually scout startups. Yes. To see not just the technology, but what are people doing with the technology in your industry and in adjacent industries, and trying to really understand how can we leverage that technology for ourselves? Because if you don't, it'll be leveraged against you. That's guaranteed.
Yeah, that's true. So you like this book, Be Less Zombie.
Yeah. First of all, it's funny. Alvin Turner brings a real tongue-in-cheek approach to everything he does. I love the quote, if you don't burn your business down every year, a competitor will supply the match. And of course, what he really is talking about is if Jeff Bezos can tell his company, that Amazon could someday cease to exist, and they've been so hugely successful, then why are you different?
Right.
So you really, and he talks about 4 key questions. And I love these questions for you to ask continually. What will change? And so when you look ahead, what do you know is going to change? right? And then what won't change? And maybe there's some things you believe won't change, and you factor that into your planning. What may change is my favorite, because if you're talking about what are the potential inflection points, and that's where you really have to have feelers out, and a strategic plan can no longer be a 3-year, strategic plan where you load up the first year with all the work, and second year and third year kind of continuing that, and then 3 years look up to see what do we do for the next 3 years. I mean, I don't see how that works anymore.
No.
So what may change, and just watching those things, and then what must change. And what must change is really one of the things you should really focus on your business. What do you know that you have to change? And if you don't change it, for example, your culture. Is your culture, do you have the proper culture for the future?
Right.
If you don't, how do you do that? Because that's not easy to do. It doesn't happen on a dime. So those are 4 key questions, and I really like those.
Yeah, and another must change right now is the impetus on the global warming and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, those kinds of things where companies have to be a lot more involved if they want to attract that new millennium generations, if they want to do business with customers that are increasingly concerned about, what type of business for good is happening out there and so forth. So you're completely right. I mean, there's some things that really need to happen, and business need to think about more strenuously, let's put it.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a couple of quotes, so maybe go through those.
Yeah, I like McKinsey and HBR. Those are 2 of my favorite for innovation, thought leadership. But if I look at McKinsey survey they did recently, they say over 80% of executives that they surveyed say that innovation is in their top 3 priorities, but less than 10% say they're happy with innovation performance. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Is it totally everyone else in the company's fault except the leadership? I don't know. I doubt it. So really, you have to do some soul searching. If you say 80% say it's top 3, 10%, less than 10% say they're happy.
And that's why we're talking about systems of innovation, to provide some structured ways that people can go through and make sure that it becomes a culture and of innovation, and people are able to actually realize the benefits that they're hoping they'll get through it.
Right.
So here's another one.
Yeah. So they also said that this survey they did of 183 organizations, looking at innovation proficiency versus economic profit, said that the innovative companies can generate profits 2.4 times higher than other corporations. Yeah. So that should tell you that if you really get good at this, it can be a really great thing for your company, or it can be the thing that makes you very, very successful.
Yeah, excellent. So we're going to go through these 8 essentials of innovation that McKinsey, it's a McKinsey model, and we're going to pick up on all of those pieces in the upcoming videos. So this first one, I guess, is part of the Aspire. Do you aspire to be a real successful innovator? And maybe walk us through those 8 essentials, and we can go through them in more detail in our future work.
Yeah, I'll go through them a bit quickly, but aspire or having the aspiration to be an innovator is the first thing. Innovation to really change your company for the future and future-proof your company has to start at the top. It can start in the middle, but if it's not supported at the top and grabbed onto by the top and supported, it won't be successful. So you have to regard that innovation-led growth as critical to your company, and that build that into the company. Mm-hmm. Not just add it to the side, or it has to become part of your company.
Yeah, you can't just say to people, everybody innovate. Well,
that's right.
They have to have more direction than that.
Well, it's kind of like saying to everybody, okay, we're not going to have a finance department, but everybody look after your finances.
Yeah.
Make sure you don't spend too much. We should be okay. It's the same thing, right? Yeah. Innovation needs to start at the top and needs to be planned. Right. So, and Choose is about investing in a balanced portfolio of initiatives across those different kinds of innovation that we talked about, mm-hmm. From building new business models to keeping your systems fresh and looking after customer experience and your employees. So you need a balanced portfolio. Yeah. That's right. And a portfolio approach is the only way to go. Discover is about that, where we talked about, do you know what's happening? Are you doing sense and respond? Do you know that there's things that could change? And therefore, what are you doing about monitoring for that change? Or better yet, controlling that change.
Right.
Right? You could be that change if you want to, if that makes sense. Or would you rather watch others do it and then make sure that you're close behind? Those are the, you have options there. Evolve is about creating those new business models and then turning them into scalable businesses. Accelerate is about being fast at it though, beating the competition, and that's hard to do.
Right.
Scaling is about launching them in the right markets with the right customers. Extend is about creating these networks, a partner network of companies and within the industry that will help you, that you help each other. And mobilize is about making sure you have a workforce that is skilled and tasked with innovating and can do the job that we're talking about. Because the leadership can aspire, but the company has to produce.
Right. So we're going to go through each of them in more detail in future videos with, some examples of tools that people can use in order to go in those these 8 different directions that need to come together for innovation. So I really love this slide that you've shown me before about what kind of leader are you,
Right.
and that also makes a big difference in terms of your success rate. So maybe explain to us these different types of leaders.
Yeah, this is a model that was developed by Westerman and his associates for the book Leading Digital. And when we were going through a digital transformation in the company I was working for at the time, I read this book and I went, wow, this is a model, but it's really a model that can apply to almost anything.
Yeah.
So when I was doing the innovation work, I thought, really, let's take this model and apply it here. So you end up with capabilities and leadership are the 2 axes. And then if you look at people on the lower left, those are people who are just starting, and you could go either of the 3 ways. And you really have your future to decide. If you're a fashionista, then you probably have some people in your company at the lower levels who want to innovate or trying to innovate, but you don't have support at the top maybe, or you don't have the right leadership in place. So you can do lots of cool stuff. You can maybe even make a little bit of cultural change, but you can't really do anything big.
It's
because
very project-based,
It's
right?
very project-based,
Yeah.
and frankly, it'll be silo-based. Because as soon as you go to do something between 2 different silos, then which leader decides, and if there's no leadership at the top governing things, then it may not get done. Conservatives are all about people who may have some decent leadership, but they don't have any capabilities and they're not focused on innovation. So they can do small things. They can do them very successfully, probably quite well, but what they can't do is transform their company. And they've got this wall that they set up that stops them from really, becoming those leaders that can really do great things. And finally, at the top right, we have leaders and their systems. And what's really important there is executive support, having the leadership to do it, and the capabilities. And again, I'll go back to the financial component of your company. If you don't have executive support for the budget, and if you don't have leadership in finance, right, and if you don't have people doing the daily accounting, you're going to have financial woes.
Yes.
But it's really just another new business, part of the business that you're building that needs those kind of capabilities, and you want to be in that upper right quadrant because that means that you can be a leader in innovation and maybe get that 2.4 times profit.
Right,
profit
exactly. So we would like to offer some next steps in each of these videos.
Right.
And, the idea is this first video is to understand that there's a lot of different kinds of innovation.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that are happening externally, internally, that require innovation. So, I think the first question that people have to ask themselves is, what do they want from innovation? And, how are they willing to look at developing an innovation strategy? So not just a general business strategy, but an innovation-focused environment and what that might look like and evolve over time. So any final thoughts on that?
Yeah. The most important thing I would recommend to people, because innovation, the innovation topic can come up at the leadership level, senior leadership level. Could be the CEO, could be the board asking about it, could be somebody else on at the leadership level, or it could be somewhere below. Quite often happens somewhere below, and then what they try to push innovation up. So the most important thing for me is that you get leadership bought in to the concept of innovation. And I love that McKinsey 8 Essentials document, because even though it's 2015, but there are updates to it. If you read that document and if you use that, if you're, let's say, down in the organization and you're lower in the organization and you want to talk to someone in the executive team, use that as your way of getting in the door. If you're at the executive team, that's your way to talk to your peers about innovation. Use that 8 Essentials
Right.
document.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.